This video will demonstrate the transportation method. It uses data from problem 13.13 at the end of chapter 13. This, unlike the graphical method, will give you the optimal solution because you create a table that puts all of the information you have into one table, and then you're able to choose the lowest option from amongst that table. So there is no formula. So no formula will be on the formula sheet. You simply have to know how to set up this table correctly. One of the keys to this is to remember that the demand is always done vertically or in columns. And so we'll have a period 1, and we will have a demand that we will put down here, a period 2, and a period 3. So this is just 3 time periods. And then it needs to be a balanced table. So for every demand period, there is a production period. We also have what we call inventory. So we have an initial inventory or beginning inventory. In regards to production and building up inventory, we will deal with that in the production. So this is just to keep track of that initial inventory and how we draw it down or how we use it. Otherwise, the inventory, the buildup of inventory is incorporated into the production, as I will demonstrate to you. And so each period should have its own column. On your homework, you may have 3 or 4 months time periods, and you need to have that appropriate number of columns. The other thing that you're going to have is they refer to it in the transportation method as a dummy column. I'm going to just refer to it as excess, and then we're going to put over here our supply or our capacity. And so let me kind of demonstrate how this is balanced here. So not including the initial inventory, we do know that we do have some initial inventory, and so we will show the capacity or the supply horizontally in the rows. And so here under inventory, it tells us we have initial inventory of 20 units. And then we then get into our production periods, and you need to give 2 lines to each one of these, 2 rows to each one of these productions. But initial inventory is just what it is, initial inventory, and so it's not counted as production period. And so you'll see that we really have a balance. Now I'm going to shade this in so that you see that that idea. So let's use a very light color shade here. A little too dark there. Let's try to get something even a little lighter than that. Maybe something to that effect. So this will be, so you have period 1, of course you have to have a production period 1, and so we have 2 lines because we have regular production, we have overtime production and subcontractor, and then there's 2 rows associated with that, and I'll show you why you want that to be the case. And so this would be the production period for time for period 2, once again regular, overtime, and subcontractor, and we give 2 rows for each one of those. And then this will be then the production period for period 3. And so we have a balanced table here in that we have 3 demand periods and 3 production periods. But of course the production periods take up a lot more rows because for each type of production you have to give 2 rows to it. And so we could label this one, in fact, let's go ahead and show you what I mean. Instead of just the shading, this would be period 1. Once again, regular, overtime, subcontractor. This becomes period 2, regular, overtime, subcontract, and this becomes period 3. So we have a balanced table. Now let's go ahead and start adding in the information we have. So they tell us that we have initial inventory of 20 units. The carrying costs per month, or per time period, is $4. And so if we use this right away, it doesn't cost us anything. Sometimes I think one of your homework problems does say they want you to charge carrying costs immediately. Part of it has to do with you're doing a whole quarter. The time periods are quarters, and so they want to charge for that first quarter. In a monthly model, usually they don't charge, but if we decide to hold that $20 or that 20, the 20 units over for the second period, we don't use it in period one, then it's going to cost us $4. And so I'm putting the price or the cost associated with that on that above line. So this inventory, here's where we will show what we use of that 20. And so $4. Now, if I carry it for 2 months, beyond period one, this becomes $8. So if I keep that, like I said, if I use it in period one, it's no cost. If I hold it a month, it's $4. If I hold it 2 months, it's $8. Now let's figure out the regular. They tell us that we have available to us, we can produce 30 units using regular labor in period one. Overtime, we can do 10 units, and the subcontractor will do 5 units. In period two, they tell us we actually can produce more, 35 units, overtime 12 units, and the subcontractor still can do just 5 for us. In period three, we go back to 30 units, and overtime is 10 units, and the subcontractor 5. So we put in all of the capacities that we have available. So we have beginning inventory, and then in period one, we can produce 30 units using regular, 10 using overtime, 5 using subcontractor, and so on. Let's put in the cost then. They tell us for regular is $100 per unit. So I'm using that second line here. The overtime is 150, and the subcontractor is 200. Now here's where it gets interesting. If you produce in period one and hold that unit over for period two, that would be the cost of the $100 plus the carrying cost. So that'd be 104. Once again, in period one, if we were to produce it in period one and hold it all the way to period three, it'd be 108. So $100 plus the $4 for period two and another $4 holding cost for period three. So we're going to do the same thing with these others. 154, this becomes 158, this becomes 200. So this would be the idea that we get something from our subcontractor in period one, but we hold it for a month to period two, or we hold it 2 more months until period three, and so we would have to pay for the carrying cost. Now this particular model does not allow back ordering, so that's not even on the table. In some cases they'll put an X here to block those out. I'm just going to leave them blank. So with that, you can't produce anything in period two for period one. If you were to do a back order, there would be some sort of cost associated, some sort of penalty, and then we could put that in here. So let's say the penalty was $10. Well, if I produce in period two using regular labor, but it's actually for period one, I would put $110 here. Same thing with size in period three. I'd have $100 in period three, 110 for period two, and 120 because I'm producing in period three, but I'm using it for period one. It's a back order. But in this case, they don't allow any back orders. On your homework, you actually do one without back orders and one with back orders. But in this case, we don't have that. So 104, this becomes, overtime becomes 150, and then 154, and then 200 and 204. And then down here, once again, we don't allow any back orders, so you can't produce anything in period three for period one or period two. So we'll just have the 100, the 150, and the 200. Last thing we need to do is we need to put down here the demand. The demand is usually shown at the very bottom. They tell us the demand for period 1 is 40 units, demand for period 2 is 50 units, and demand is 40 units. So the table's now all set up. We have taken all the information we have and we put it in here. Now here's what we need to do. Is we need to look at period 1 and we say, okay, what is the cheapest cost? Let me put a 0 in there so that you see that there. We have to produce 40, or the demand is 40 units. Well, we have 20 in beginning inventory. So let's go ahead and use that 20 in beginning inventory. So that would leave us none. We used up all of the 20. So that's why this dummy column's in here, to let us know. This is kind of the marker to say that that 20, that initial inventory, is going to be used up in period 1 and it's 0 cost. We need another 20, and we can get another 20. So we can do this here. We can put in another 20 here, and that will then take care of our demand. Now, here I'm going to just put a marker in here because we still have 10 left. So we could have produced 10 more using regular labor, but we've now met demand at the cheapest price possible. 0 times 20 and then the 20 times 100. So you could figure out the cost plan. Let's go on to period 2. So period 2 we got 50. Now we look at this column. We're done with period 1, so just concentrate on this column. 4 is the cheapest, but remember we used all of that because there's none left. It's a 0. 100, we can get 35 from that. So let's do that. Let's do 35. And so that would then give us, I'm not sure why it's shading that in. So 35, and then this would mean that we used all of that up. So let's put that as 0 there to designate that we used all of that up. So 35, so we used all that, 100. So now we go and say, what's the next? Well, look at this. We can actually go back to period 1. It's cheaper to get that 10 more, so that would put us up to 45 units. So we're going to go back here, and actually in period 1 they're going to produce the 20 for period 1, but they're also going to produce 10 more and hold them because it's just that $4 extra holding cost. So we'll put a 10 there, and then that actually then zeroes all that out. And so the next option that's the cheapest is we need the remaining 5 because we're up to 45. So it would be 5 times 150. And so we've now met the demand. So let's go on to period 3. Period 3, we need 40. So once again, we look at this. Just as a reminder, 8 is the cheapest, but remember we used that up long ago. So the next cheapest option is the 100. We can get 30 there. And that's going to then give us 0 here. And we can then, so we need 10 more. 10 more, let's see. We used all of this, and we used all of that. So 104, 108 doesn't work. So it looks like the next cheapest option is to get the remaining 10 from this 150 here. And that would then zero that out in overtime. And so we could then calculate out the cost. In fact, they want you to do that. So anytime you have a quantity times its price, so this would be 20 times 0, 20 times 100, and add those all up, 10 times 104, 35 times 100, 5 times 150. That would be the cost of the plan. The total cost of this plan is $11,790. So if we were to do all of those, add up all of those things. But we have a couple things we need to finish off in this table here. This is just for information wise. We want to know how much capacity we didn't use. So we still have the 10 overtime in period 1 and the 5 from the subcontractor. We still have the 12 overtime in period 2 and the 5 from the subcontractor. And we have just the 5 from the subcontractor in period 3. That's important to know how much extra, because if these were all getting pretty close to 0, we may have to look at trying to increase capacity in the future. But that is the transportation method. If you're doing back orders like we talked about, you just have to take into account that penalty.